So I'm here with Jeremy Garcia. I got introduced to Jeremy because he shared an article that he had wrote for Bitcoin Magazine about comparing Bitcoin to Noah's Ark, and I read it and I agreed with basically everything in there. It was nice to see somebody who was like having in the same state of mind as me. So just wanted to have a chat with him, talk a little bit more about how Jeremy, how you got into Bitcoin, your short version of your story into Bitcoin, and then what sparked you to start writing, and when did you first, have your first article published, and and we'll just start there.
Thanks for having me. Um, I got into Bitcoin in December of 2019. Before that, I've been really into finance and early retirement. I've been studying money and monetary history for over 5 years, very in depth, for the sole reason of learning what money is and also to get back my time so that I can have it with my family. Because essentially, when we go to work, we're trading our time for money. And I don't want to be trading my time for money that's getting printed into perpetuity, also known as the flood of fiat. So I was into gold and silver 5 years ago, and that's all I saved most of my fiat money in that, because I knew that if I saved in fiat, that my savings, my hard-earned money that I spent all my time trying to earn was just going down. So at least gold and silver could help me. Well, when I found out about Bitcoin, and I started, since I knew a lot about gold and silver and the history, and I could put the two together and understand that Bitcoin was way better than both of those from a store value standpoint. And so that's when I just started just putting everything into it. And once again, just to save my hard-earned time from being eroded away, because that's what's happening. As long as they're flooding the world with fiat, the time that you spend at work or I spend at work is being flooded away. That's really the short of how I got into Bitcoin. Since December of 2019 till now, I've had these headphones on for 24/7, we'll say, on Twitter Spaces. I read as many books as I can, and that was when my rabbit hole experience started.
Nice. So obviously that helps, like, having an understanding of the money printer and how that steals your time and energy, right? I mean, that was the first thing I think for me that I didn't fully grasp when I was first introduced to Bitcoin, was in this idea of inflation. Like, oh, they can loan out, like now any amount that they want. They don't have to have, they're not like moving money cash from a vault to the person you're buying your house from. They're just like snapping it into thin air, and the result of that is they're stealing our time. I remember that was my first real realization, and then from there I was like, man, that's fucked up, and I see every dollar that I have as me supporting that system. um, so then, yeah, like, just like you, I just thought, okay, yeah, well, I'm gonna have as little money as possible in fiat, and put it somewhere where it's actually going to help me. Like they say, a penny saved is a penny earned, right? I mean, that's literally what it is with Bitcoin. It's like, instead of working for the money printers, right? Like when let's say over 10 years, right? Like the average of inflation is whatever, 10% or 15%, if we're talking real inflation. So 10% of every working hour, you're working for them, right? Um, so instead of that, when I work now and I put that money into some Satoshis, now it's working for me. Like I am doubling my efforts, tripling my efforts. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
I really like
and
how you
that's my
put
first.
that. I really like how you put that. Sorry to interrupt, but if they're if inflation is 10%, they're essentially stealing 10% of your time. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, and then if you're saving it in cash, then they're taking another 10% the next year from your savings, right? So then it's like, okay, now you give them 80% of that time. It's nuts.
It's utterly defying, Mike, because I look at it this way. And actually, I look at it the same way Michael Saylor uh, puts it or looks at it. The guy's a genius. I've listened to all his podcasts, sometimes 3 or 4 times over. He knows what the hell is going on. And when I don't want to talk about him too much, but when he had $500 million in the bank, that was just a melting ice cube, and he just put it into Bitcoin because he saw that inflation, in his humble opinion, was 20 to 30%. 30, a little over 30% if you consider the M1 money supply from 2019, or see 2020. Sorry, 2019. In 2019, I believe the Federal Reserve printed 34% of all dollars that had ever existed, effectively stealing 34% of all the wealth. Therefore, that was the hurdle rate that he saw. And he's like, shoot, at one point in time, all my savings was gaining me 5%. And now it's like the equivalent, he said, of having all his money in the backyard, and someone just comes in and steals 5% every once in a while. Or sorry, 30%. It's crazy. So that's what actually, I
Yeah.
always tell people on Twitter Spaces that it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a custodian, if you're a plumber, if you're a mechanic, if you're an architect, I don't care who you are. You can effectively do what Michael Saylor has done with your savings on a fractional basis. And you're gonna be amazed by the life-changing events that happen thereafter, just because you were able to save your time from being eroded away.
Yeah, I agree. And just to touch on one of the points that you mentioned, talking about like, they created 34% of the dollar, so therefore they stole 34% of the wealth. I mean, the people who have assets and houses, right? I mean, they're hurt a little bit less for sure.
Mhm.
34% of anybody who doesn't have an asset that has either a savings in cash or is just living month to month, they're the ones that are really having their wealth stolen, right? So it's like double fucked. It's like you're picking on the poorest. It's
Yeah,
insanity.
and that's why it's ironically enough, the poorest of the poor countries are going to be the ones that first adopt Bitcoin, and are already seeing that, for the mere fact that they are in a worse inflationary environment than us. In Nigeria, um, Pakistan, these hyperinflationary environments where they, compared to Americans, we have it made here because we don't know truly hyperinflation. Um, and they are going through it. So they understand that they need to quickly get on, build an arc with Bitcoin, and save their money from being flooded away. More so than us rich and happy and fat Americans. And I say that in a kind way. It's just we don't. What's crazy, Mike, is this: in the history of the United States, we've had three currencies. The first currency was the continental dollar, and that one got hyperinflated away when we were fighting the British. Then you had the greenback. That one got hyperinflated away when we were fighting the Civil War. And now we have the US dollar. So, unbeknownst to most Americans, we've had three currencies in our time. And the dollar is no different than any currency that's ever been created in the world. It is going to go away. There's no way for the federal government to get out of this system. They have to keep on inflating. That's the only way. And so the inflation is a flood. So the inspiration on my article, um, like you said, I started writing for Bitcoin magazine 3 months ago. This is my third article, and I was inspired to do so because, as you and I spoke offline, there's so many people in Bitcoin that are so smart, and they're contributing, much like you contributing here on YouTube and with your forum. And for me, I wanted to contribute, so I feel like I have my good strength in writing, so I started writing. Well, this one I entitled Satoshi's Arc Will Save Bitcoiners. And it was inspired by the fact that growing up and trying to have to explain to my parents, who are they're Christians, they could relate with the story. Most people can relate with the story of Noah and the flood. And I saw the perfect um, analogy with Satoshi and Noah. And so if you want me, I can go further into that. I don't know where you want to steer
Yeah,
from there.
yeah, we'll do that right now. So yeah, I want to tie that together. So basically, yeah, it's interesting that you say that the countries who are less prosperous right now will be the first ones to jump on. And they're gonna fucking skyrocket because they're getting the best of the both worlds, right? It's like the sweet isn't as sweet unless you have the sour, and they've had the sour. So the sweet is going to be so good. They've developed the work ethic that comes with having to live that way, and when they finally get their hands on this stuff and really it takes over, it's just that combined is gonna, that's what I think. And so
Yeah.
to tie it together to the arc, so I don't know if you listen to Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson ever. They talk about ancient civilizations, or Graham Hancock talks more about ancient civilizations. Randall Carlson is more of like a geologist kind of guy. And so basically, but they both studied the flood, like the ice age, and what the events leading up to the ice age. So Graham Hancock is pretty convinced that the story of Noah is real, is likely very real. And based on DNA genes, what it seems like is there was a remnant, a small group of people who actually survived the flood, who were very knowledgeable. Okay, given the pyramids, the Sphinx has water weathering that shows it's like 12,000 years old at least. Okay, um, so it's a very high civilized society to be able to do that. So anyway, high civilized society, big flood comes, some people escape, and where they go is they go to the hunter-gatherer areas because those people actually know how to survive in crazy difficult times, and they felt like that's where we can restart civilization. So I feel like maybe that's what's happening also here with Bitcoin, is like these other countries are going to adopt it out of necessity, and then if our country or Australia or United States or New Zealand or whatever starts cracking down hard, guess where the fuck we're going? You know, like we're going to be the remnant, and we're going to leave the flood to go to these hunter gatherers, and we're going to build this shit up even better.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yep, it's Bitcoiners. If you want to speak about remnant, the remnant, Bitcoiners are modern day Noahs. Um, it just so happened that Noah knew something that the rest of the world didn't, and that's why I think Bitcoiners tend to have, they get a little frustrated because they know something, and just like Noah would have had such questions as in my article, why are you building such a big boat if there's no water in sight? You're wasting your time.
Hmm.
Where's
Hmm.
the flood? You're a fool. Um, that Bitcoiners face the same thing. And so the remnant, the Bitcoiners that went down the rabbit hole to understand Bitcoin are modern day Noahs. And they've been told, much like the creator told Noah that he was going to purge the earth of all the evil and sin. He said, build an ark and you'll be saved, you and your family will be safe from it. So that's what he did. And that's what Bitcoiners are essentially are doing. I mean, what's crazy is the way it actually mouths with the story in the Bible is the message that was given to Bitcoiners, the first message on the um, time chain, the Bitcoin,
Genesis block.
the Genesis block, the first block. It said, um, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. That's no different than the creator telling Noah, build an ark, there's going to be a flood, but your family will be saved if you do what I say. So that's why I said Bitcoiners, essentially, we know there's a flood coming. It's actually already here. Those that understand inflation, monetary history, understand that every civilization since the advent of currency, uh, the currency has failed. Thousands and thousands of currencies, none have ever lasted till this day. And it's going to be same with the dollar. Thus, the reason to build an ark, and I liken arks to being Bitcoin little b, because Bitcoin little b is the asset. Bitcoin big B is the protocol. So when Satoshi created the protocol, that's like the earth. The creator created the earth. Satoshi created the protocol. The asset is the Bitcoin, little b, on the creator created the earth with resources for Noah to build his arks. Satoshi created the protocol with an asset, big Bitcoin, little b. Satoshis, if you consider the smallest Satoshi as being the smallest ark you'd have, you're using Satoshis to build your ark. And in the article, basically the amount of Satoshis you accumulate to build your ark is it's a function of your understanding of how dire of a circumstance we're in relative to what you expect the flood to be. And so, as we were talking offline, you can either build your own ark, or for those people that your loved ones, build an ark for them, do partly because of the size of your ark. So an ark can be as small as a Satoshi or as big as 100 million Satoshis. And let's just say that the biggest ark is 100 million Satoshis. We know it's not, but that's one Bitcoin. That one Bitcoin can save a lot of people. That one ark, that ark is going to be a very big ark. A Satoshi is a very tiny ark, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
You want to have more
Yeah.
than that, but that's the analogy. That's why I was
Yeah,
so
the way I
inspired.
thought about it, it's almost the same. But and one thing really quickly is Bitcoin decentralizes everything, right? So it's like decentralized Noah, right? Essentially, right? Like we're all
Yeah,
Noah.
yeah.
It's pretty funny. But like the way that I would think about it is like Satoshi built the Ark. The Ark is there, and when I come and I'm buying more Satoshis, I'm building my own space on the ark. Like I'm extending the boat for myself on the same boat. Like we're all in Bitcoin on this boat. And so if I'm going to buy Bitcoin for somebody else, like my mom, I'm building a spot on the boat for her essentially. And then I see like Elon Musk or Roger Ver, or all these other shit coins, they have their own boats, but I'm looking at those boats going like, I don't know why anybody would want to be on this boat. Like what the fuck are they thinking about? You know?
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah,
yeah, that's how I thought about it, and I thought about it like Noah's gone, like Satoshi's gone. He built the ark. He's like, look, the boat's here, and anybody, look, you can do it yourself. You can build it out and make it bigger for yourself, but I'm done, right? And so I think that's where I kind of struggled with a little bit here is like because I feel like there's a life cycle of Bitcoin, right? Like I first find out about Bitcoin, I'm like, that's kind of interesting, but I don't take it that seriously, right? And then some along the lines, 10 hours in, 100 hours in, I'm like, this is profound. Like, this has taken up my entire life. Like, I think about everything through the lens of Bitcoin, right? And then you talk to other people, right? And you want to get other people in. But I think after a certain point, and after talking to a certain number of people and seeing that usually the success rate is pretty low, right? It's like, why am I out here shouting for people, hey, like, come on the boat, look at the boat, it's the boat, like, get on here, get on here. It's like, look, I feel like maybe it's like a Mormon type of thing. Maybe everybody contributes like their bicycle years, you know?
yeah,
And then after
yeah.
that, it's like, okay, like I did my thing. And if you can't see it now, then I can't help you. So again, that's why one of the reasons why I built this channel was to try to not have the same conversations over and over again. And if a conversation comes up that I've already covered, it's like, here, just watch this instead. That way I can kind of meet the best of both worlds because I have that internal battle of, do I stop telling people? Like, is that the right thing to do or not? Like, I don't know. Like, what do you do? Can you relate with that?
I think that's you're doing the smartest thing that you to be able to send the message because quite frankly, when I call my parents or my family on a phone call, that's one person. But now we have a video because you created one that I can actually send to all my family. So no, you're doing a great service. I mean, all the Bitcoiners that are doing in the space of either writing or providing content, you're spreading the knowledge. I mean, and it's amazing. I mean, I've been, I should be doing it the way you're doing it. And thank you for having this YouTube channel because you can just click it and then you don't have to say the same thing over and over, like you said. And then because there's so many Bitcoiners out there that analogize Bitcoin as so many different things, there might be a certain analogy that one person gets better than the other. I understand that, like the gold bugs. If you analogize Bitcoin to gold, well, they're going to understand it. Real estate people, if you analogize Bitcoin to being digital real estate, and that actually those two things I relate to a lot. And so you could convince me more so of Bitcoin if you had those two analogies. So A farmer, I mean, I've thought about that analogy. I've thought about Bitcoin as being like the farm, the land being the protocol, and the corn that you plant in it is the Bitcoin little b. And if you told a farmer that, well, they'd relate with it right away. But as soon as you start telling them, wow, Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol that was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, who engineered the beautifulest time chain in the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
you'll never. So if we can analogize, and it's funny, it's much like the Bible. As I told you before, I'm not religious, but I've read the Bible a lot. The Bible was written in such a manner where how many parables are there? Every parable is an analogy for people that read the Bible to be able to understand something as simple as you reap what you sow. You build on a house on top of sand, it'll collapse. You build on a house on top of rock, it won't. So I think that's with your channel, when you get all these people that are you're interviewing, they're going to have a different analogy than I told you. Someone might relate with it, and then the amount of people you can impact will be that many people you can save from the flood. So for
Yeah,
me,
exactly.
my medium is writing, but it's limited to how many people read my article. So I try to share it with as many people as possible. Probably YouTube is a more viewed medium. So, but any medium we can use, we just gotta kind of spread the message. And I always think to myself that I feel like a Jehovah Witness or someone that is going door to door knocking, and
Mormon,
people don't.
you're on your bicycle.
Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, here's an interesting thought, Mike. I was always taught, most people are taught, that money isn't everything, and I don't agree with that actually anymore. To a certain extent, if money wasn't everything, why do we spend our whole life working for it? Give me all your money and tell me if you're not happy. Give me all your money, and as soon as you can't feed your kids, tell me if they're happy. So in the grand scheme of things, money has got a bad rap because, well, if you're in the Christian world or whatever world,
Yeah.
everyone goes to that money is the root of all evil, whatever, or the love of money is the root of all evil. But we don't love money. The deal is, if you love your time, well, then you're gonna do your damnedest to save it. And that's the biggest thing that I've had to unlearn, is that time is not, or money is not everything. One could argue
Yeah.
that money isn't everything, but I really do believe that money is everything, because money's time, and the time
And
that we
time is
have on
everything.
earth. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You think about it, right? Like if I used to work in mobile apps, and a lot of times you underestimate a project and people want fixed prices, so you end up spending twice the number of hours making the same amount of money. And you look at it and you're like, dude, I made like less than minimum wage on this thing. Like, would I pay somebody else $15 to have an hour with my family? Like, absolutely. So, yeah, I agree
That's
with
right.
you. Time is money. And the way, like, to tie it back to the farm a little bit, like I always thought of money as like food, right? If we were more primitive, you would have food and water, and you would want to have a reserve of food and water. And you can't go out and get hunt food and water in most cities now, which actually I want to change my circumstances in that regard. I want to be able to sustain myself. But the way you get food and water is money, like we're trading money. So you need money to have food, water, and shelter. So it's an absolute essential. It's like saying, yeah, you don't need any food, water, or shelter. You're going to be fine. And in terms of the farmer, the way I see it is like if you keep your money in fiat, you're basically storing your wealth in apples. And over time, more and more of those apples are going to rot, okay? And you're just going to have less apples, okay? Bitcoin's honey. You're storing your value in honey. It's forever self-preserving, and if anything, and it's even better because it's worth more as you have it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so I think you tie the
yeah,
two together, time and like, okay, because the thing is, money is time, but money is also effort, right? Like if it takes me an hour to do something sitting on my ass, I should get paid less than somebody who takes an hour chopping fucking wood, right? So a lot of these guys, it's not only their time, they fucking breaking their back, making their money. So 10% of their back breaking is given to the government or the money printers or whoever. So
yeah. You're
yeah,
you're right.
yeah.
The farm I relate with a lot because I have a farm, not very big, but before. I worked 5 years as a civil engineer slash agricultural engineer. I went to farms and ranches all over my state. Farmers are the most efficient, smart people in the world. Essentially, if you want to talk about time is money, the time that they spend on their farm when they plant that seed and then it grows and then they harvest it, that's what makes them the most efficient relative to all people that expend their time. Because the amount of labor that you said, that time is your labor as well, the amount of labor that they spent has a direct correlation to their harvest. So they're actually the most efficient people on earth, because as long as they're working efficiently, which they all do, they know the reward. So the amount from the time that they till the soil to the time that they put the seed to the time that they water it to when it sprouts and then they harvest it and then they put it in the barn for to last all year, they are the direct beneficiaries of all that time that they spent, because their animals get to eat what they grew, and then they get to eat the animals that they fed. So um, I may write an article, Mike, quite frankly, based off this conversation, just analogizing Bitcoin and farming, just because
Yeah.
it's funny in this conversation. I had the aha moment, but so thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, so we'll get close to wrapping it up here. The only thing I wanted to say is like, it's exciting to see decentralization. Decentralization makes everything better. And like you said, you have your own little small farm. I'm in California. I'm planning on going to Texas. And eventually the goal is to have, a good amount of land and a little house and to grow as much stuff as I can and chickens and a couple horses. Like I want more natural setting. And I think if we decentralize farming, um, the the reliability of our food system goes up, the quality of the food goes up, it's closer to us, doesn't have to ship from so far, whatever. And we're just a stronger civilization. And you know, one thing I thought of while we were talking here, right? And you're talking about you felt like your strength is in writing, and so that's how you wanted to contribute to the Bitcoin space. I think that's really what is going to be the craziest, profound, biggest impact on society is when we have sound money, you actually start to go towards the things that you are passionate about and you feel you're good at and stuff that wakes you up in the morning, because you're not just running to stay in place in the fiat world. And now you feel like, okay, I can see a future, I can see a path forward. And I really love this space. I want to contribute. So what am I good at? And whenever else do you ask yourself that question? It's always, what can I make the most money with? How can I live right now? It's not, what am I good at and how can I do that? And that's what Bitcoin is leading me to do and you to do. And I mean, hundreds of people that I've talked to.
Yeah, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. If we actually were working for money that wasn't being printed away, we would have the time to do what we loved, and we'd have the time to actually think about what our strengths were, more so than what we do now with a diluted version of what we work for. And I'll leave you with two thoughts from my article, just a tidbit for the viewers. Satoshi understood that a dirty fiat world could be fixed with a monetary system that is, as you said several times, which is very important, decentralized, it's trustless, has rules but no rulers, has a fixed money supply, has capitalistic incentives for miners to protect the Bitcoin network through an ingenious difficulty adjustment, has no bias towards the rich or the poor, has the ability to force authoritarianism to bend its knee to the free people, values and properly compensates the time and energy expended by humans, requires proof of work, and perpetuates prosperity through free market incentives. If you fix the money, that's what happens. And we're basically slaves to our current system. And when you put it that way, the notion of basically what I just said, the ability to force authoritarianism to bend its knee to free people. I don't know if you've seen that little emoji, or
Me?
I don't know what you call it, meme. Yeah, it shows a bunch of slaves that are kneeling down, and then they have one ruler and with a whip whipping them. One of the slaves decides to stand up. He's a Bitcoiner. Another slave stands up, Bitcoiner. Well, they all stand up. And slowly but surely, the ruler that was whipping them went from being authoritarian like to being a little coward. The tide turned, and that's what's happening with Bitcoin. The time that we're going to be able to gain back will allow us to, everyone hopefully, to finally come to the understanding that what they've been working for, they've been slaves to. Whereas with Bitcoin, they're not slaves. You're not a slave. There's definitely a free market. Right now, we have no free market. So as soon as you have a free market and you get out of being a slave and be free, you're you have the power to actually wield the whip. Let's not say it that way. You have the power to stand up with everyone else, and there's no authority. There's no authority. So we're living in unprecedented times where the authority is going to be upended, and I think that there's no way around it. I mean, the game theory behind Bitcoin is such that no one knows what's going to happen, but for it to get to the point that it was less than a cent and now it's 60,000, it's if you were just to use that as a metric for what it's done game theory wise, not even, and that has a direct correlation with what's happened as far as adoption. It's going to upend authority, and they don't know what's coming for them. Quite frankly, I've worked for the government for 15 years. They're smart people, but they're not nimble. The most intellectually the most intellectual people in government that are in high powers of security, whether it's the NSA or the CIA, they probably know. I know they know about cryptocurrencies, but they don't know that Bitcoin's knocking on the door, and they have no way to be able to upend it. China banned all mining. That, like, the biggest thing that's happened in the history. Well, second biggest thing, I think. The fork wars are probably the biggest thing, but if you were to equivocate the next big event, when China, world superpower, banned mining and reduced the hash power by 50%, and now we're back up and over that, that goes to show you that it's like whack-a-mole. You whack it here, it'll come back there. So they don't know what's coming for them, Mike.
Amen, brother. Yeah, I see it like, the way the hash rate moves and pops up. It's like Terminator 2, the T1000 model or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
liquid just melts and then it all comes back
Oh
together.
man,
Like
that's awesome. That's
it's no
awesome.
big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
awesome.
So I think I'll leave it with this. So many of those bullet points that you put on there, and I like how you spread them out too. They're so easy to like, just easier for your brain to grab onto the words, but that whole list is profound, right? Decentralization, trustless, like each one of those, we could have hour-long conversations about them. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think one of the reasons why we keep getting pulled back in and the hash rate comes back is because the incentives are there, but at the foundation, it's like we have the first thing ever where we don't have to trust anyone anymore. It's completely trustless, and I think everybody can see the value in that, just looking at history and all these currencies that we've destroyed and all the abuses of power across the board. And so when you finally look at a system that does not have an authority, does not you don't need to trust anybody to take care of something, we're all like, yes, this is it. This is the revolution, man. So
It
yeah,
is.
if you have any final words, this was great, man. I'm really glad we did this, and I'm glad you sent me that article and reached out, and I'm sure we'll talk again. But you want to leave with anything?
Yeah, for me, the way in which I can share my articles is by just sending them to people. And with you sending this, you're going to be able to have a wider audience. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to do what I'm doing. You can never learn too much about Bitcoin because, as someone said in the Twitter Spaces today, you lift one rock and there's 1,000 more insects under that one. You lift the next rock, all those insects, if you want to call, are just more things to study. And in my humble opinion, buy as much Satoshis that you can, because the Satoshis that you're buying are going to be what builds your arc, and you're going to be able to float above the flood of fiat that's already here, and that's going to get worse. The flood of fiat happened when Nixon depegged us off the gold. Since then, every country's had the ability that has the ability has just printed. So the flood's going to get worse, much worse. So just save your time by buying Bitcoin and just keep on stacking sats.
My man. All right. Well, shout out Satoshi wherever you are. Thanks, man. Fucking genius of the of our species. And Jeremy, hey man, nice talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you again, man. Peace
Thanks a
out, brother.
lot. Appreciate it.